Good evening, everyone. Thanks once again for sticking around for this length of time. And I hope you won't mind me reading off my script. I had to make some very last-minute changes because my last draft was just a pointless rambling that wasn't really going anywhere. So this is my final draft, which is much more related to my idea behind Autism and the Web. It's going to be, well, 50% equality and 50% web development. So without further ado, so this is my talk, Autism and the Web. As you might have already figured out by just speaking to me now, I'm autistic myself, and what I want to put, excuse me, is, I want to talk about some of the life problems I've had because of my condition, and also want to mention that there's still a lot more to learn about autism. So I'm going to do this in 3 stages: understanding what autism is, what it can do for the web design industry, and how websites can be made to be much more user-friendly towards people on the autistic spectrum and people with various other disabilities. And yeah, I nearly forgot to mention, what I want to achieve tonight is develop an understanding so that any employers and employees might see the potential effects of bringing more people on the spectrum and various other disabilities into the workplace. So what autism is, it's lifelong developmental disability. Yeah, that affects how people on the spectrum perceive the world and interact with others. In terms of behaviour, people see, hear and feel the world differently to other people. And according to the National Autistic Society, there's about 700,000 people in the UK who have autism. That's more than 1 in 100. And well, what causes the condition, it's still being investigated, but it's generally agreed that upon being a genetic condition with environmental influences. And so the trouble with autism is that not only, the trouble with autism is that people who have it don't always appear different to me and you. It's like I said earlier, it's behavioural differences that can cause misunderstandings about the whole thing. It's like flapping of the arms, some intense concentration when doing something, and I do that one. Or talking about things in a very loud voice, very fast, almost unintelligible, and I'm at the moment trying very hard to soften my tone of voice and speak so that people can understand me. Okay, so I went to Manchester back in May to attend an Upfront conference 2016, and I saw this infographic in a talk by Derek Featherstone, a field guide to web accessibility, and then his talk was all about user experience and how it affects disabled people, including people on the autistic spectrum. He used this infographic, and what I really like about it is it's like a representation of myself in cartoon format. I think that Archie speaks the truth when he describes how language and communication is confusing and difficult at times, and it takes a bit longer than the average person to process conversations, and even though at times it can be good at making conversation, it can sometimes take a bit longer than normal to respond. But normal people sometimes have that problem as well, so it's not a problem that seriously affects people with disabilities. Autism doesn't mean this. I think I might have skipped a page there. Yeah, autism doesn't mean this, but many autistic children do start out this way with their very limited communication and inability to interact with their surroundings, which may give them the impression that autistic people are mentally unstable or like children in grown-up bodies. Well, I'm going to tell you, with the right environment and support, most autistic children can grow up to be functional adults capable of work. So as Archie said in my last slide, people with autism sometimes can cause misunderstandings and difficulties for communicating with people and relations with others in the work and social environment. So, moving on. If you're familiar with any of these characters, it might have given you an impression of what people on the autistic spectrum can be like as adults. But this is also not entirely true. This is just the media portrayal. And it doesn't really teach anything other than stereotypes. We're not all irresponsible, like Rain Man, not unemotional like Sheldon, not creepy like the Riddler, which has if you're a Gotham fan, and not sociopaths like Sherlock. I had to get my sister to remind me that Sherlock says, one of his lines is, I'm a sociopath. Well, that's not true. He completely contradicts himself. So taking away fact from fiction, not every autistic person is incapable of looking after themselves. There are quite a high number of them in employment, so hats off to them for obtaining it in the first place, because in my experience, employment is very difficult to get hold of. And I suspect it's because people I may have spoken to still do not understand what the autistic spectrum is and how to cater for employees on the spectrum. So when people on the spectrum learn, and they do, it leads them all down to this. People on the autistic spectrum who are capable of working are extremely passionate about their jobs and their interests, and they simply aspire to recreate and repeat structures that they like. So you might be thinking at this point, why hire somebody on the autistic spectrum? Well, despite their personal and physical difficulties, they're very employable and they have the skills to show for it. So what I've listed here are just a few ideas and traits that people on the spectrum possess naturally when they're in the working environment. You might find a person who knows PHP so well that they never miss a semicolon when they're writing functions, or you might get a concept artist who can create the most amazing blueprints for front-end development. So as an example of the potential that autistic people bring to the workplace, this is the guy behind the Pokemon franchise. I'm sorry, I hope I'm not rubbing salt in your wounds over there. But this is the guy who's stopped you from playing Pokemon for the rest of your life.
Have you got his number?
You'll have to contact Nintendo. So this guy, his name's Satoshi Tajiri. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And Pokemon was basically his creation, and he's also on the autistic spectrum. I don't really think I need to explain how that turned out to the world, but it's simply amazing that such a franchise and an impact on the world of franchising, on the world of viral campaigns. You may remember years and years back when Pokemon first came out and it was available for the Game Boy. It had connector cables which connect to Game Boy and have multiplayer tournaments. That was one of the earliest examples of portable gaming and connecting so that it created multiplayer platforms. And it was all his invention. So not only has he developed software, he's developed hardware as well. So in bringing Pokemon to life, he's made business very good for Nintendo and made himself very rich in the process. So I'm just going to go back to the career slide there. People with autism who happen to work in the web design industry would have a natural talent for creativity. It's not all about drawing and painting, but bringing their ideas to life. Whether it's down to front-end development, back-end development, writing code or using Photoshop, when something takes their interest, they're simply very good at making it happen. So now I'm finally going to start talking about web design, and this is what we're all here for. I can clearly remember having problems in the past about using websites on my phone, but I never really took much notice of them. I'm talking about back before responsive web design came into place. You still have difficulties with sites that haven't quite been adapted for use on the phone or the tablet. But back then, before I even got into this industry, I never even took notice of the problem. It never occurred to me that there was actually a solution to this problem. It was much easier to use a website on the go these days. So when I started doing web design at university, it changed the way I think about the technology. But all about responsive web design, it helped me to discover not just to make them nicer to use, but it affected my stress levels as well. I'm well aware that most other people feel this way, but it's people on the spectrum and various other disabilities that may suffer more when they're using poorly made websites. I'll just take a drink. So moving on. When I was doing my research for this talk, I came across a really interesting report about this guy. I'm really sorry I can't pronounce his name. Too many consonants. But I picked that up because he's a user experience researcher, and he's doing something similar to what I'm planning to do for my final year project, in which he creates games to help people on the spectrum improve their learning. What I read in his report is that he claims that user experience researchers rarely ever study how autistic people react to products. And so he insists on that it's really important that they start doing that, because it affects their behaviour and attitudes towards a product, like whether it's a website or a game or an app, software, hardware, and it's all the same thing. He also points out that autistic people won't always find an alternative route around an obstacle when they're encountering a problem. Sometimes in cases where you encounter a problem, you do look for another way to go around it, but it's not so straightforward for people on the spectrum. They might keep trying what they've done until they get so fed up that they just stop. So he also finds that, sorry, I nearly started repeating myself there. I'm going to call him Mr. Toff. He says that they're not just workers, they're consumers as well. So what's beneficial for businesses in catering to the disabled audience is that through modern conveniences like online shopping, in this age where you can just buy and sell almost anything on the internet, if people with disabilities are not able to use your website because if it's got a very poor user experience, bad interface, for example, the business could well lose out. So as far as user experience is concerned, I really like websites that follow this layout. See how the elements fill up the entire width of the screen. There's very little use of text, and the content's all down to the minimum, and how the structure's very fluid on desktop, tablet and mobile. It's all consistent, and it's much less painful for everybody to use. So how do you make a website that's suitable for people on the autistic spectrum? So to answer that, I've collected some recommendations from the National Autistic Society website. The idea is not just to make web browsing better for people on the spectrum, but I think people with various disabilities might agree with me on this one. So I've broken these down just a few simple suggestions. So to quote text in the use of colour, use clear and simple words that are simply easier to understand. This is a problem for people who have trouble reading, or people with very low concentration, like yours truly. Many users will find that, say, text, like black on white, is too visually stimulating, and sometimes it causes the words to dance about on the screen. So choose your background and foreground colours very carefully, because not only does that ruin a good website if you choose the wrong colours, it's simply distracting, and it's going to affect people's attitudes towards your website. And it's safer to use the same font throughout the entire website. When you keep the text size down to the same, like I've got here, and your titles are big enough so that they stand out, but don't stretch out so they go off the screen, it helps keep your website tidy and consistent. So, yeah, I've gone quite ahead of myself there. Don't do that. It's just distracting, it's aggressive, and no one likes it. So on to navigation and linking. So if you're providing hyperlinks to outside sources, it's always safer to keep them related to what your website is about, what the project is that you're doing, similar to the way that you would provide your references at the end of a research report. We do that at university. This is quite straightforward. You probably don't need me to tell you this, but navigation really does need to be the same on all your web pages. It's just, once again, for tidiness and consistency. And make sure that there's a very good gap between your hyperlinks. And I thought of that one when I was renewing my car tax online, and what I found was the next and previous buttons when I was using the online form were far too close together, and I kept hitting the wrong button, and not only messing up my form, but taking it a lot longer than usual to renew my car tax. So make sure there's a good gap between the hyperlinks. And yeah, ensure that they speak for themselves, and that they do what they're supposed to do. It's no good having a link that says blog and it takes to something that's not a blog. That's just strange. So on my last slide, before I offer to answer some questions that you might have, avoid creating pop-ups and new windows without informing the user. It's just safer to do that. I mean, a person with epilepsy might not take to it very well, so it's always safer to give them a warning message, like you would a cookie policy. It's safer to let them know that that a pop-up window is going to be there, and that's only in cases where you absolutely have to have a pop-up window. So it's a rare thing, but it's just to be on the safe side. So, so this is quite straightforward. So I went back a bit there. So I can't do this without providing alternative text by default. It's whenever I'm uploading images to any projects that I'm doing. Sometimes the rules of CSS and HTML5 will not let me won't let me do that without having alternative text. What it's supposed to do is help disabled users understand what is going on there, especially in instances where if an image fails to load, or if it still needs to be put up there, for example. It just helps to keep the content going, and it helps people know what it is you're talking about. And, this one's talking about responsive web design, where when we're using percentages instead of pixels to help keep size at a reasonable level, like when you're keeping text size so that it's still readable on mobile phones, or images so that they stick to they keep to the size of the phone screen, and don't get so big that they go off the screen. Right, it's just for more comfortable and good on the eyes. So in conclusion, I found that quote and I absolutely love it. An autistic mind is a terrible thing to waste, and that's speaking volumes about the skills that autistic people bring to the workplace, like the Pokemon inventor with his imagination and his engineering skills, and it's all down to the brain, and I think that's just about it. Anybody got any questions for me?